With every new Zelda game, new races are introduced. In Ocarina of Time, it was the Kokiri, Gorons, Sheikah, and Gerudo. Wind Waker had Thorito, while in Twilight Princess, the Twily and Uga took the stage. And we can't forget the Minish from the Minish Cap. Breath of the Wild continues the tradition, giving us the Zonai, but we don't get to see them, as they went extinct long before the events of the game. In Tears of the Kingdom, however, we finally get to meet them. But where did they come from? And why didn't we hear about them in previous Zelda games? The obvious answer is Nintendo hadn't created them yet. But I'm talking lore wise. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to take a look at this ancient and enigmatic race to find out just who they are and how they connect to Hyrule's history. So without further ado, let's get started. The Zonai are among the oldest races in Hyrule, along with the Hylians, Sheikah, and Gorons, and were likely present during the first battle against Demise. We know for a fact that they once lived on the surface of Hyrule, due to their ruins being scattered throughout the land, particularly in the Faron region. They might have lived here alongside primitive Hylian tribes, indicated by the barbarian armor first seen in Breath of the Wild. The armor description reads, armor once favored by an ancient warlike tribe from the Faron region. And the armor itself is tailored for human slash Hylian proportions, rather than the much larger Zonai. The Faron region contains one of the largest concentrations of Zonai structures featured in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and was likely built prior to Demise's invasion of the surface. Looking at this evidence, one might assume that this is the Zonai homeland. However, I think I found their true point of origin. Now, before we go any further, I just want to let everyone know that this is simply a theory, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. It'll make my mad ramblings a lot easier to swallow, I guarantee. Having said that, let's continue. While playing Tears of the Kingdom, we learned that the Zonai were a technologically advanced race and ran numerous mining operations throughout Hyrule. These operations were run by automatons similar to the ones seen in Skyward Sword. Both sets of machines have been tasked with mining rare resources, time stones in Skyward Sword, and Zonite in Tears of the Kingdom, and continue their work even after their creators either died out or abandoned them. We know for certain that the Zonai built the automatons in Tears of the Kingdom, as indicated by Rauru, but I believe that they also created the ones in Skyward Sword. The reasoning behind this theory boils down to a simple question: who else could have done it? The Zonai boasted both magical abilities and technological prowess, and these talents seem to be essential when creating artificial life. As far as we know, the only other race possessing these attributes is the Sheikah, but the mining operations in Skyward Sword's Lanryu region suggests that this desolate wasteland was once a land of industry and commerce. Considering that the ancient Sheikah acted as Hylia's defenders, it seems unlikely that they'd be interested in building industries and running economies. It would be fair to assume that their one and only concern would be the protection of Hylia and her descendants. Moreover, Sheikah technology featured in Breath of the Wild, such as guardians, divine beasts, Sheikah towers, shrines, is specifically tailored for combat, reconnaissance, and aiding the chosen hero in his quest to protect Hylia's descendants. The Sheikah built machines to protect others. The ancient Zonai built machines to help themselves and protect their assets. For this reason, I believe the ancient Zonai, prior to Skyward Sword, hailed from the Lanryu region. But this leaves us with one important question: what happened to them? Even before the imprisoning war, the Zonai were on the brink of extinction, and afterwards, the last of their race, Rauru and Minoru, bit the dust. But how can such a powerful, technologically advanced society just die out while other, more primitive and/or Neolithic races, such as the Hylians and Gorons, thrive? I think it all centers around the events of Skyward Sword. In the game, Hylia creates floating islands to protect the Hylians from Demise and his forces, along with a cloud barrier. I speculate that the Zonai, fearing annihilation, abandoned their ancestral home and secretly took up residence on one or more of these islands, ones far removed from Skyloft, where they would gradually build a new civilization, while their Hylian neighbors remained completely oblivious to their presence. It's implied that Hylia's magic is what keeps these islands afloat, and after her presumed death following the war with Demise, it's reasonable to think that her magic would have died along with her, or, at the very least, weakened considerably. If we assume this to be true, Skyloft and the other floating islands should have fallen from the sky, yet they continued to float. There are two possible reasons explaining this phenomenon. The first is that Hylia's magic simply endured, even ages after her death. Plausible for sure, but I've come up with another explanation. It's pretty out there, but please bear with me. Near the end of Skyward Sword, we discover that the Triforce is hidden in Skyloft, on the Isle of the Goddess. The sacred artifact was placed there by Hylia to protect it from demise, but I think it served a secondary function, as a safeguard, to ensure that even after Hylia's death, Skyloft will remain safe. In other words, should Hylia's enchantments ever come undone, the power of the Triforce would pick up the proverbial slack, maintaining and nourishing the Sky Islands in perpetuity. In an attempt to defeat Demise, Link uses a Triforce to send the Isle of the Goddess plummeting to the surface, thus separating it and its magic from Skyloft. This, in theory, should have broken the enchantment, and I think it did. I believe that over the centuries following Skyward Sword, the cloud barrier gradually dissipated, and Skyloft and other floating islands began descending to the surface. By that time, the entire Hylian race had relocated to the surface. Yet in Tears of the Kingdom, there are still numerous floating islands, each containing remnants of Zonai civilization. If the goddess, and later the Triforce, are what kept these land masses afloat, why do they still occupy the skies above Hyrule? And why did they remain hidden from plain sight countless centuries later? The answer lies with the Zonai themselves, who decided to remain in the sky rather than return to the surface. Using a combination of magic and technology, they could have simulated Hylia's original enchantment, thus keeping the islands afloat and continuing to advance their society. It's even possible they recreated the cloud barrier to keep their existence hidden until they finally revealed themselves to the Hylians, whom, having long forgotten their ancient connection to the sky, regarded them as gods. But if the Zonai were so powerful, why did they go extinct? The simple answer is we don't know. It could have been any number of reasons: disease, famine, low birth rates, interdimensional and or time displacement. The possibilities are endless, and it seems unlikely that Nintendo will give us a definitive answer anytime soon. So for now, we're on our own. But if I had to guess, I'd say that the floating islands were simply too small to support an ever-growing population, and in the end, the Zonai slowly died out. The fact that there's no evidence of wide-scale farming operations or food productions throughout the islands support this theory. Now, one might ask, why would the Zonai choose to live in the sky? They descended to the surface sometime after the events of Skyward Sword. Why not simply stay there? There's one possible answer, and it harkens back to Final Fantasy VII, during a conversation between Cloud and Barret. The former asks why the poor citizens of Midgard remain in the slums. Barret explains that they just don't have the money, which is understandable. Others, however, love their homes, no matter how inhospitable they become. And I think that's where we'll stop today. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And if you have any Zonai theories of your own, please don't hesitate to discuss them in the comment section. This is my first Zelda analysis, and it was a lot of fun. I'd definitely like to do more in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.